Marcus Chen had always been fascinated by the stars, but he never imagined he would one day find himself standing on the bridge of an alien vessel, holding a small wooden box that seemed almost ridiculous in the grandeur of the crystalline command center. The events that led him here began 3 months ago when the first contact protocols were established between Earth and the Zephyrian Empire. The Zephyrians were unlike anything humanity had imagined. Tall, graceful beings with skin that shimmered like starlight and eyes that held the depth of galaxies. Their technology was so advanced that their ships appeared to be grown rather than built, with organic curves and surfaces that pulsed with bioluminescent energy. When they arrived at Earth's orbital station, they came not as conquerors but as curious explorers, seeking to understand the diverse cultures of the galaxy. Marcus, a cultural anthropologist who had specialized in gift-giving traditions across human societies, was selected as part of the diplomatic team. His expertise in understanding how different cultures expressed respect, friendship, and alliance through the exchange of meaningful objects made him invaluable to the first contact mission. The Zephyrians, it turned out, had their own complex traditions surrounding gifts, though theirs involved rare crystals that could store memories and emotions. The alien ship was a marvel of bioengineering. Walls that seemed to breathe, floors that adjusted to provide perfect comfort for any species walking upon them, and ceilings that displayed real-time images of distant star systems. Marcus had spent weeks aboard the vessel, learning about Zephyrian culture alongside Ambassador Elena Rodriguez and her team. The aliens were patient teachers, sharing their knowledge of art, science, and philosophy with genuine enthusiasm. It was during his 3rd week aboard that Marcus first encountered Princess Lyralii. She entered the cultural exchange chamber like flowing water, her movements so graceful they seemed to defy the laws of physics. Her skin held a subtle blue undertone that marked her as royalty among her people, and the crown of living light that floated above her head responded to her emotions with shifting patterns of color. The princess was young by Zephyrian standards, perhaps equivalent to a human in their early 20s, but her eyes held an ancient wisdom that spoke of genetic memories passed down through generations of rulers. She had been tasked with understanding human culture, particularly their customs around friendship and alliance. This made her and Marcus natural partners in the cultural exchange program. Their first conversation took place in the ship's observation deck, where the vast expanse of space stretched endlessly beyond transparent walls. Princess Lyralii spoke with a voice like silver bells, her words translated by the advanced neural interface that allowed real-time communication between their species. "Your people have such fascinating traditions," she said, her crown flickering with curiosity patterns. "You give objects to show care for one another, even when these objects have no practical value. We have studied your customs of birthday gifts, wedding presents, and holiday exchanges. It seems to serve a purpose beyond mere material exchange." Marcus nodded, watching how her crown responded to her intellectual excitement. "Gift-giving is one of our most fundamental social bonds. It's not about the value of the object, but about the thought behind it, the time taken to choose something meaningful, and the act of giving itself. It creates connections between people." The princess tilted her head in that uniquely Zephyrian way that indicated deep thinking. "Your Ambassador Rodriguez explained this concept, but I find it difficult to understand. Among my people, we share memories and emotions directly through our memory crystals. The gift becomes the actual experience or feeling. But your gifts are separate objects that somehow carry meaning without containing the actual memory or emotion." Over the following days, Marcus and Princess Lyralii spent hours discussing human customs. She was particularly intrigued by the concept of handmade gifts, objects created specifically for the recipient that held no advanced technology or special properties beyond the care and effort invested in their creation. This was completely foreign to Zephyrian culture, where their biotechnology meant that objects were grown rather than crafted, and each item was perfectly designed for its intended function. Marcus found himself drawn to the princess not just as a cultural subject of study, but as an individual. Despite the vast differences between their species, she possessed a curiosity about the universe that matched his own. She asked thoughtful questions about human emotions, human relationships, and human art. When she laughed at his explanations of human humor, the sound created patterns of golden light in her crown that were among the most beautiful things he had ever seen. During one particularly lengthy discussion about human art, Princess Lyralii mentioned her fascination with human creation using primitive tools. She had watched archived videos of human woodcarvers, painters, and sculptors, amazed that beings could create beauty without the assistance of bioneural interfaces or living tools that responded to thought. "Your hands," she said, looking at Marcus's calloused fingers with wonder, "they can shape matter through direct contact and primitive implements. This seems like magic to us. Our tools are extensions of our consciousness, but yours require physical skill and muscle memory developed over time." It was then that Marcus got his idea. That evening, he returned to his quarters aboard the human section of the diplomatic vessel and began working on something he had not attempted in years. Using a small piece of oak wood he had brought from Earth as a personal memento, and a set of basic carving tools from the ship's maintenance supplies, he began to create something that would bridge the gap between their cultures. Night after night, Marcus worked on his project. The wood was hard and unforgiving, nothing like the responsive biomaterials the Zephyrians used. Every cut had to be planned and executed with care, because there was no way to undo a mistake. His fingers grew sore from gripping the primitive tools, and his back ached from hunching over his work in the cramped quarters. The object he was creating was simple by human standards but would be extraordinary by Zephyrian understanding. It was a small box, no larger than his palm, carved with intricate patterns that told a story without words. The lid was designed to fit perfectly, with tiny hinges carved from the same piece of wood. Inside, he planned to place something even more meaningful. As word of the gift spread among the human diplomatic team, some questioned his choice. Ambassador Rodriguez worried that such a primitive offering might be seen as insulting to such an advanced civilization. Dr. Sarah Kim, the team's xenobiologist, suggested that the princess might not even understand the concept of an object that served no functional purpose. But Marcus persisted, driven by his growing understanding of Princess Lyralii and his desire to share something truly human with her. He remembered her fascination with human hands and their ability to create, and he wanted to give her something that could only exist because of that uniquely human capability. The carving process became a meditation for Marcus. As he worked, he thought about all the conversations he had shared with the princess, all the moments of wonder when she discovered something new about human culture. He carved patterns that represented growth and learning, symbols that spoke of friendship across impossible distances, and designs that captured the beauty of two different species finding common ground. When he finally finished the box, Marcus spent another evening working on its contents. Inside, he placed a collection of small objects that represented different aspects of human culture. A smooth stone from Earth's beaches, worn by countless tides into perfect roundness. A pressed flower from his grandmother's garden, preserved between thin sheets of bio-neutral plastic. A small photograph of Earth taken from the lunar observatory, showing the blue marble that was humanity's home. But the most important item was a letter, written by hand on real paper with ink from a fountain pen. In it, Marcus had written about his friendship with Princess Lyralii, about the joy of discovering how two such different species could find understanding and connection. He wrote about his hopes for the future relationship between their peoples, and his gratitude for the chance to be part of this historic first contact. The letter was something no Zephyrian could create or truly understand, because it was imperfect. The handwriting was uneven, there were small smudges where the ink had not dried properly, and the thoughts were organized in a purely human way, with emotions and logic intertwined in patterns that defied the precise mental organization of Zephyrian consciousness. As Marcus prepared for the gift presentation ceremony, he felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness that reminded him of childhood birthdays. The ceremony would take place in the ship's main cultural exchange chamber, with representatives from both species in attendance. It would be recorded and transmitted to both Earth and the Zephyrian homeworld as a symbol of growing friendship between their civilizations. The morning of the ceremony, Marcus woke early and spent extra time preparing. He wore his best diplomatic uniform and carefully polished the wooden box until it gleamed. The simple object looked almost absurd next to the advanced technology that surrounded him, but he reminded himself that its very simplicity was what made it special. As he made his way to the cultural exchange chamber, Marcus encountered several Zephyrian crew members who had heard about the gift ceremony. They regarded him with curious expressions, their bioluminescent communication patches flickering with interest. One of them, a scientist named Veltar who had become something of a friend, approached him. "Human Marcus," Veltar said in his harmonious voice, "we have heard of your intended gift for Princess Lyralii. Our understanding suggests it is created using only your physical manipulation of matter. This concept intrigues us greatly. May we observe your hands?" Marcus held out his hands for Veltar's examination. The alien scientist studied his fingers with fascination, noting the calluses formed by the carving work and the slight staining from the wood oils. "Remarkable," Veltar observed. "Your appendages show physical adaptation from the creation process. Among our people, Tullius leaves no such marks because our implements respond directly to neural commands. Your primitive methods create a permanent record of the creative act upon your body itself." This observation made Marcus realize something he had not considered before. The gift he was about to present was not just a wooden box with objects inside, but also a representation of his own physical investment in the creation process. His hands bore the evidence of his work, making the gift a part of himself in a way that Zephyrian biotechnology could never replicate. When Marcus entered the cultural exchange chamber, he found it filled with beings from both species. The room's bioluminescent walls had been programmed to display patterns that were pleasing to both human and Zephyrian visual systems, creating a backdrop of gentle, swirling colors that seemed to dance in harmony with the mixed emotions in the room. Princess Lyralii stood at the center of the chamber, her crown displaying patterns Marcus had learned to associate with formal ceremony mixed with personal excitement. She wore robes that seemed to be made of liquid starlight, and her presence commanded attention from every being in the room. Ambassador Rodriguez stepped forward to begin the ceremony with a formal statement about cultural exchange and diplomatic friendship. Her words were simultaneously translated into Zephyrian harmonic speech, creating an otherworldly chorus that filled the chamber. As she spoke, Marcus felt the weight of the moment settling upon him. This was more than just giving a gift to a friend. This was a moment that would be studied and remembered by both species. The success or failure of his simple offering could influence how humans were perceived by the vast Zephyrian Empire. The pressure was almost overwhelming, but, as Marcus looked at Princess Lyralii's expectant expression, he remembered why he had made this gift in the first place. When Ambassador Rodriguez finished her formal remarks, she gestured for Marcus to step forward. The chamber fell silent except for the gentle humming of the ship's biosystems and the soft harmonics of Zephyrian breathing patterns. "Princess Lyralii," Marcus began, his voice steady despite his nervousness, "over the past weeks, you have shown great interest in understanding human culture and customs. Today, I would like to share with you something that represents not just human tradition, but also the friendship that has grown between us." He held out the wooden box, and every being in the chamber leaned forward slightly to observe this moment of cross-species cultural exchange. Princess Lyralii's crown flickered with patterns Marcus had never seen before, complex swirls of color that suggested deep emotion mixed with curiosity. "This gift was created using only my hands and simple tools," Marcus continued. "Every mark on its surface was made through direct physical effort, without the assistance of any advanced technology. Inside, I have placed objects that represent my world and my people, but, more importantly, items that represent the friendship and understanding we have shared." Princess Lyralii reached out with hands that seemed almost too delicate to touch the rough wooden surface of the box. As her fingers made contact with the carved patterns, her crown exploded into a display of colors so intense that several humans in the chamber gasped in surprise. The wooden box, so simple and primitive by Zephyrian standards, seemed to affect the princess in a way that no one had anticipated. Her touch traced the carved patterns with reverence, and, when she lifted the box to examine it more closely, Marcus could see tears forming in her galaxy-deep eyes. But these were not tears of disappointment or confusion. The patterns in her crown, the way her bioluminescent patches pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat, and the soft harmonics emerging from her throat all indicated overwhelming emotion of a positive nature. What happened next would change everything Marcus thought he knew about interspecies friendship and the power of simple human gestures. Princess Lyralii held the wooden box as if it contained the most precious treasure in the galaxy. Her crown continued to display the intense patterns of emotion that had surprised everyone in the chamber, but now Marcus noticed something else in her expression. Behind the wonder and appreciation, there was something deeper, more complex. It looked almost like recognition, as if she understood something about the gift that went beyond its simple physical form. The ceremony continued with Princess Lyralii carefully opening the box and examining each item Marcus had placed inside. She held the smooth stone between her fingers, marveling at how Earth's natural forces had shaped it over countless years. The pressed flower fascinated her even more, as Zephyrian plants were typically bioengineered for specific purposes rather than growing wild in chaotic natural patterns. When she found the photograph of Earth, her crown shifted to patterns Marcus had learned indicated deep thoughtfulness. She studied the image for several minutes, pointing out details to the other Zephyrians present and explaining concepts in their harmonic language that the translation systems struggled to convert into human speech. But it was when she discovered the handwritten letter that something extraordinary happened. As Princess Lyralii unfolded the paper and began to read, her entire bioluminescence system began to pulse in perfect synchronization. The other Zephyrians in the chamber stepped back slightly, their own crown pattern showing what Marcus had learned was surprise mixed with reverence. Princess Lyralii read the letter completely, her eyes moving across each imperfect line of handwriting with intense concentration. When she finished, she looked up at Marcus with an expression that seemed to hold the weight of worlds. "Human Marcus," she said, her voice carrying harmonics he had never heard before, "this gift, it represents something my people believed was impossible. You have created an object that carries not just physical matter, but also." She paused, searching for words that could bridge the gap between their species' understanding. "You have embedded your essence into this creation through your physical effort and emotional investment." The chamber fell silent as Princess Lyralii carefully placed the letter back into the box and closed the carved lid. She held it against her chest, and her crown began displaying patterns that caused every Zephyrian present to bow their heads in what appeared to be a gesture of respect. Ambassador Rodriguez leaned toward Dr. Kim and whispered, "I've never seen them react like this. What do you think is happening?" Before Dr. Kim could respond, Princess Lyralii spoke again, her words directed not just to Marcus but to the entire assembly. "There is something you must understand about this moment," she said, her crown now displaying formal announcement patterns. "Among my people, we have ancient legends about a form of creation we believed was lost to the universe. We call it essence binding, the ability to place one's spiritual energy into physical matter through direct manipulation and emotional investment." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. This was not the response he had expected to his simple wooden box. Princess Lyralii continued, "Our ancestors spoke of a time before biotechnology, when our people created objects with their own hands and embedded their spirits into these creations. But, as we evolved and developed our neural interfaces with living technology, we lost this ability. It became the stuff of legends and children's stories." She held up the wooden box so everyone in the chamber could see it clearly. "This gift represents something we thought was extinct in the universe, the pure act of creation through physical effort, emotional investment, and spiritual connection. Human Marcus has shown us that essence binding is not lost, it simply exists in species we had not yet encountered." The implications of her words hit Marcus like a wave. His simple gift had not just pleased the princess, it had connected with something fundamental in Zephyrian cultural memory and spiritual understanding. What he had intended as a friendly gesture had become something far more significant. Over the following days, word of the gift and its significance spread throughout the Zephyrian ship and beyond. Marcus found himself in demand for interviews and demonstrations, with Zephyrian scientists and cultural experts wanting to understand every aspect of human handcrafting traditions. The wooden box became something of a cultural artifact, studied and analyzed by beings who had never before encountered an object that carried what they perceived as spiritual essence. But the real change was in his relationship with Princess Lyralii. Their daily conversations took on a new depth as she began to share aspects of Zephyrian culture that had previously been considered too sacred or complex for human understanding. "My people are fascinated by efficiency and perfection," she explained during one of their sessions in the observation deck. "Our biotechnology responds to our thoughts instantly, creating exactly what we envision without flaw or variation. But your gift has reminded us of something we lost in our pursuit of perfection, the beauty of imperfection, the meaning that comes from struggle and effort, and the spiritual connection that forms between creator and creation." Marcus learned that Zephyrian society, for all its advanced technology and spiritual sophistication, had been struggling with a growing sense of disconnection among its younger generations. Their ability to create perfect objects through thought alone had led to a culture where young Zephyrians felt no personal investment in their creations. Everything was easy, instant, and flawless, but somehow empty of deeper meaning. "Your wooden box is imperfect," Princess Lyralii said, running her fingers along its surface. "I can feel the marks where your tools slipped slightly, the places where the wood's grain resisted your efforts, and the spots where you had to adapt your vision to work with the material's natural properties. These imperfections tell the story of your struggle to create, and that struggle is what gives the object its spiritual power." As their friendship deepened, Princess Lyralii began to share more personal aspects of her life. Despite her royal status and the reverence shown to her by other Zephyrians, she confessed to feeling isolated by the expectations of her position and the perfection demanded of her every action. "I have been bred for leadership," she told Marcus during a private conversation in her personal chambers, a space filled with living art that responded to her emotions with shifting patterns of light and color. "My genetic line was selected for intelligence, wisdom, and spiritual strength. I have access to the memories of my ancestors through our royal memory crystals, and I am expected to make decisions with the accumulated wisdom of thousands of years of rulers." Marcus could hear the burden in her voice, even through the translation system. "That sounds incredibly lonely," he said. Her crown flickered with patterns he recognized as sadness mixed with gratitude for understanding. "It is. I have never had a friend who saw me as simply Lyralii rather than Princess Lyralii. Your gift, created for me as an individual rather than for my position, was the first personal present I have ever received." This revelation shook Marcus to his core. In his effort to bridge cultural differences, he had inadvertently given something far more precious than he could have imagined, the experience of personal friendship to someone who had never known it. Their conversations began to explore deeper philosophical questions about the nature of perfection, effort, and meaning. Princess Lyralii was particularly intrigued by human concepts of growth through struggle and the value placed on overcoming challenges. "Your species seems to find purpose in difficulty," she observed. "You celebrate achievements that require effort over those that come easily. This is completely contrary to Zephyrian thinking, where we have always sought to eliminate struggle and make all things effortless." Marcus tried to explain the human relationship with challenge and achievement, but found it difficult to put into words concepts that were so fundamental to human experience. "I think we find meaning in the journey as much as the destination," he said. "When something is difficult to achieve, its completion becomes more valuable to us. The effort we put in becomes part of what we accomplish." Princess Lyralii spent several days contemplating this concept, consulting with her advisors and even communicating with scholars on the Zephyrian homeworld. Her research revealed that ancient Zephyrian texts spoke of similar concepts, but these ideas had been largely forgotten as their civilization advanced beyond the need for physical struggle. "Your gift has done more than introduce me to human culture," she told Marcus. "It has reconnected me with lost aspects of my own people's heritage. We are planning to begin new research into our ancestors' handcrafting traditions and the spiritual practices that surrounded them." But the most significant development came when Princess Lyralii made an announcement that surprised even her own advisors. She declared her intention to learn human handcrafting techniques and to create something with her own hands, without the assistance of biotechnology or neural interfaces. The request created a diplomatic challenge, as it would require Princess Lyralii to visit the human section of the ship and work with primitive tools that could potentially cause her physical harm. Zephyrian physiology was more delicate than human, and their hands had evolved for neural interface work rather than gripping crude implements. Ambassador Rodriguez was initially reluctant to approve such an arrangement, worried about the diplomatic consequences if the princess were to be injured while learning human crafting techniques. But Princess Lyralii's enthusiasm for the project, supported by her own cultural advisors who recognized the historical significance of her interest, eventually overcame these concerns. Marcus found himself in the unprecedented position of becoming a teacher to alien royalty. The human section of the ship was hastily rearranged to create a workshop space where Princess Lyralii could safely experiment with human tools and materials. Safety protocols were established, medical teams were placed on standby, and every session was carefully monitored to ensure no harm came to their distinguished student. The first lesson was simply holding human tools. Princess Lyraliai's hands, evolved for delicate neural interface work, struggled to grip the handles of chisels and carving knives. Her fingers were longer and more sensitive than human digits, and the rough textures of the wooden handles felt alien to her touch. "This is much more difficult than I anticipated," she admitted after dropping a carving tool for the third time. "How do your hands adapt to gripping these implements?" Marcus showed her how to wrap her fingers around the tools and how to use her thumb to provide stability and control. It took several sessions before she could hold a carving knife without dropping it, and even longer before she could make deliberate cuts in wood without the blade wandering off course. But Princess Lyraliai approached the challenge with the same intellectual curiosity she brought to all learning. She studied human hand positions, practiced grip strength exercises, and even consulted with her biomedical advisors about temporarily modifying her hand sensitivity to better handle rough materials. The project she chose for her first creation was ambitious for a beginner, a small sculpture that would represent the friendship between their species. She envisioned two figures, one human and one Zephyrian, standing together beneath a star that represented the shared knowledge they had discovered. Progress was slow and often frustrating. Princess Lyraliai's first attempts resulted in cuts that went too deep, destroying hours of careful work and moments of lost control. Her hands developed unfamiliar aches from gripping tools, and her fingers became rough and calloused in ways that shocked her medical attendants. But, with each failure, Marcus watched something remarkable happening. The princess who had been bred for perfection was learning the value of imperfection, the meaning that came from struggle, and the satisfaction of achieving something through pure personal effort rather than technological assistance. "I am beginning to understand why your species values this process," she said one day, examining a sculpture that was clearly amateur work but represented weeks of dedicated effort. "Each mistake teaches me something new about the material, about the tools, and about my own capabilities. The final object will carry the story of all these lessons." As news of Princess Lyraliai's handcrafting project spread throughout the Zephyrian fleet, it triggered something unexpected. Other young Zephyrians began expressing interest in learning primitive creation techniques. Requests came in from the homeworld for detailed reports on human crafting methods, and cultural scholars began studying ancient Zephyrian texts with new interest in forgotten manual traditions. Marcus realized that his simple gift had started something much larger than a cross-cultural friendship. He had inadvertently triggered a cultural renaissance among the Zephyrians, reconnecting them with aspects of their heritage that had been lost to technological advancement. But the full impact of what he had set in motion would not become clear until Princess Lyraliai completed her sculpture and revealed her own planned response to his gift. 3 weeks after beginning her sculpture project, Princess Lyraliai finally completed her first handcrafted creation. The small wooden figures representing human and Zephyrian friendship were rough around the edges, with tool marks visible in the surface and proportions that would never meet the mathematical perfection of Zephyrian bioart. But, to Marcus, it was one of the most beautiful things he had ever seen. The sculpture showed clear evidence of the princess's learning process. Early cuts were hesitant and shallow, while later work displayed growing confidence and skill. Her representation of the human figure bore little resemblance to actual human anatomy, but somehow captured the essence of human curiosity and determination. The Zephyrian figure was more accurate, though simplified, and the star above them both showed delicate detailing that spoke of hours of careful work. "It is imperfect in every technical sense," Princess Lyraliai said as she presented the finished sculpture to Marcus, "but it contains something that none of our bio-creations possess. Every mark tells a story of effort, learning, and personal growth. I finally understand why your wooden box affected me so deeply." The presentation ceremony for her completed sculpture was attended by the same mixed group of humans and Zephyrians who had witnessed Marcus's original gift. But, this time, the Zephyrians in attendance showed a level of reverence that surprised even Ambassador Rodriguez. When Princess Lyraliai explained how each flaw in the sculpture represented a lesson learned and each successful cut represented growing skill, the other Zephyrians began to understand concepts their culture had largely forgotten. The idea that struggle could create value, that imperfection could hold meaning, and that personal effort could imbue objects with spiritual significance began to resonate through their community. But Princess Lyraliai's sculpture was only the beginning of her response to Marcus's gift. Over the following days, she worked with her advisors to prepare something unprecedented in Zephyrian diplomatic history. "Human Marcus," she said during one of their regular conversations, her crown displaying patterns he had learned indicated formal announcement mixed with personal excitement, "your gift has changed not just my understanding, but the understanding of my entire people. We wish to honor this gift and the friendship it represents with something equally meaningful from our culture." Marcus felt a mixture of curiosity and nervousness. Zephyrian gifts typically involved memory crystals or biotechnology that was far beyond human understanding. He wondered what form their response might take. Traditional Zephyrian gifts involve sharing memories or emotions directly through our crystal technology, Princess Lyralii explained. But such gifts would be meaningless to your species, as you lack the neural interfaces necessary to access crystal-stored experiences. We needed to find a way to give you something as personally meaningful as what you gave to me. She paused, her crown shifting to patterns that seemed to indicate both excitement and nervousness. "We have decided to share with your people something that has never been offered to another species, access to our collective memory archives and an invitation to establish permanent cultural exchange stations within Zephyrian space." The magnitude of what she was offering took several moments to sink in. The Zephyrian collective memory archives contained thousands of years of their civilization's accumulated knowledge, artistic achievements, and scientific discoveries. Access to such information would advance human understanding by centuries, if not millennia. But even more significant was the offer of permanent cultural exchange stations. The Zephyrians had never allowed other species to establish ongoing presence within their territory. Such an arrangement would represent a level of trust and friendship that went far beyond normal diplomatic relations. "Princess," Marcus said, struggling to find words adequate for the moment, "this is far more generous than my simple gift deserved. I gave you a wooden box carved by one person. You're offering the accumulated wisdom of an entire civilization." Her crown flickered with patterns he recognized as gentle amusement mixed with affection. "Human Marcus, you still do not understand the true value of what you gave me. Your wooden box represents something far more precious than accumulated knowledge. It represents the possibility of personal growth through struggle, the beauty of imperfection, and the spiritual connection between creator and creation. These concepts have revolutionized our thinking." Princess Lyralii went on to explain how Marcus's gift had triggered deep discussions among Zephyrian leaders about the direction of their civilization. Their pursuit of perfection and effortless creation had led to a generation of young Zephyrians who felt disconnected from their work and their culture. The concept of finding meaning through struggle and value through personal effort offered a path toward renewed cultural vitality. "Your gift reminded us of who we used to be before we became so focused on technological advancement," she said. "We have decided to reintroduce handcrafting traditions into our education system and to establish new cultural practices that honor the value of personal effort. Your wooden box has literally changed the course of our civilization's development." The formal announcement of the Zephyrian response to Marcus's gift was made in a ceremony that was broadcast simultaneously to Earth, the Zephyrian homeworld, and several other allied species. Ambassador Rodriguez delivered a speech about the power of personal friendship to bridge impossible gaps between species, while Zephyrian leaders spoke about rediscovering lost wisdom through contact with human culture. But the most meaningful moment came when Princess Lyralii presented Marcus with the Zephyrian response gift. Instead of the advanced technology or memory crystals he had expected, she handed him something that looked remarkably like his own wooden box. This container was created using traditional Zephyrian handcrafting techniques that had not been practiced for over 1,000 years, she explained. "My advisors and I spent weeks researching ancient texts and consulting with our oldest memory archives to rediscover these lost methods. The container was made from a biogrown wood analog that had been shaped entirely by hand tools recreated from historical descriptions. Its surface showed the same kind of tool marks and imperfections that characterized Marcus's gift, but with distinctly Zephyrian aesthetic elements. The patterns carved into its surface told a story in the flowing script of their ancient language, and its proportions followed mathematical relationships that were pleasing to Zephyrian visual perception. Inside the container, Princess Lyralii had placed items that paralleled Marcus's original gift but represented Zephyrian culture. There was a crystal fragment from their homeworld's sacred mountains, a preserved bioluminescent flower from the royal gardens, and a traditional Zephyrian artwork created using pigments that shifted color based on the viewer's emotional state. But the most significant item was a memory crystal that had been specially modified to function with human neural patterns. Unlike normal Zephyrian memory crystals that required advanced bioneural interfaces, this one could share its stored experiences through simple physical contact. The memory crystal contains my personal experiences of learning your handcrafting techniques, Princess Lyralii explained. When you touch it, you will experience the struggle, frustration, and eventual triumph of creating something with your own hands from my perspective. It is my attempt to share the gift of personal growth that you gave to me. When Marcus touched the crystal, he was immediately overwhelmed by an influx of alien sensation and emotion. He experienced the princess's initial confusion at holding crude tools, her frustration with repeated failures, and her growing excitement as she began to master the techniques. But, most powerfully, he felt her emotional transformation as she discovered the satisfaction of personal achievement through struggle. The experience lasted only moments in real time, but it felt like weeks of shared learning and growth. When it ended, Marcus understood that Princess Lyralii had given him something equally precious to what he had given her, the experience of learning and growth from the perspective of another species. But even this extraordinary gift was only part of the Zephyrian response. Over the following weeks, preparations began for the establishment of the first human cultural exchange station in Zephyrian space. Teams of human anthropologists, artists, and educators would be stationed permanently within the Zephyrian Empire to continue the cultural exchange that had begun with a simple wooden box. Similarly, young Zephyrians who had become interested in handcrafting traditions would be given opportunities to study with human artisans and craftspeople. The exchange would be ongoing, creating permanent bridges between the cultures that went far beyond normal diplomatic relations. The impact of these developments extended throughout both civilizations. On Earth, the news that a simple act of friendship had opened such unprecedented opportunities inspired a new generation of cultural ambassadors and artists. Applications for the Zephyrian exchange programs numbered in the millions, and human educational institutions began developing new curricula focused on interspecies cultural understanding. Among the Zephyrians, the reintroduction of handcrafting traditions created a cultural renaissance. Young Zephyrians who had felt disconnected from their perfectly efficient society found new meaning in the struggle and satisfaction of creating with their own hands. Ancient arts that had been forgotten for millennia were rediscovered and adapted for contemporary Zephyrian life. Princess Lyralii became something of a cultural hero among her people, not for her royal status but for her willingness to embrace struggle and imperfection in pursuit of deeper meaning. Her rough sculpture became a symbol of the new Zephyrian movement toward valuing effort and personal growth over technological perfection. As the cultural exchange programs expanded and flourished, Marcus often reflected on the chain of events that had begun with his simple desire to give a meaningful gift to a new friend. What had started as a personal gesture had grown into something that would influence both civilizations for generations to come. The wooden box still sat in Princess Lyralii's personal chambers, now joined by her own handcrafted sculpture and similar creations by other Zephyrians who had learned the ancient arts. It had become the centerpiece of a small shrine dedicated to the value of imperfection and the beauty of personal effort. During one of their final conversations before Marcus returned to Earth to help coordinate the new exchange programs, Princess Lyralii reflected on how their friendship had changed both their lives. "When I first touched your wooden box, I felt something I had never experienced before," she said, her crown displaying patterns of deep contentment mixed with nostalgia. It was the sensation of connecting with another being's spiritual energy through the physical work they had invested in creating something. Among my people, such connections were thought to be impossible. Marcus looked out at the vast expanse of space beyond the observation deck windows, thinking about how much his understanding of friendship and cultural connection had expanded since meeting the princess. "I never imagined that a simple gift could have such far-reaching consequences. I just wanted to share something meaningful with a friend." Princess Lyraliai's crown flickered with the patterns he had learned indicated gentle amusement. Perhaps that is precisely why it was so powerful. You gave it without expecting anything in return, purely as an expression of friendship. That kind of selfless connection between beings from different species has never been documented in our historical records. As preparation for departure continued, both humans and Zephyrians worked to establish protocols and procedures for the ongoing cultural exchange. The programs would continue long after the original diplomatic mission ended, creating permanent bonds between civilizations that had once been separated by impossible distances and incomprehensible differences. The success of the exchange had attracted attention from other species throughout the galaxy, many of whom expressed interest in similar cultural connection programs. What had begun as first contact between two civilizations was evolving into a model for peaceful interaction and mutual enrichment that could transform relationships between species throughout known space. Marcus's wooden box had become more than a gift between friends, it had become a symbol of the power of personal connection to bridge any gap, no matter how vast or seemingly impossible to cross. In the end, the greatest gift had not been the objects exchanged, but the friendship and understanding that had grown between two beings from different worlds who discovered they had far more in common than either had ever imagined possible. The story of the wooden box and the alien princess would be told and retold for generations, inspiring future cultural ambassadors and reminding both species that sometimes the smallest gestures can change the course of history itself. In a universe full of advanced technology and complex political relationships, it was a simple act of friendship that opened doorways to previously unimaginable possibilities.